New types of sensors are about to flood the marketplace, but are they also going to disrupt how we live our lives and in the workplace? We're going to check in on what technologies are driving this new wave of sensors on this episode of Today in Tech. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Joining me on the show today is Greg Rouse. He is the president of Asahi Kasei Microdevices, or also AKM. Welcome to the show, Greg. Wow, that was a mouthful. Sorry about that. Talk to me a little bit, Greg, about who AKM is and your role within the company.
Yeah, so AKM is a division of Asahi Kasei. So Asahi Kasei is a large Japanese conglomerate, and AKM is the microdevices division of that. So we, as you mentioned, one of our primary focuses is on sensors.
All right. So, when we talked before the show, there were a lot of different innovations that have been happening in the sensor space, and we haven't really talked about that on the show lately. But I wanted to ask you about, within the last few years, what is causing this disruption? Is it just a case of, well, everything's smaller, cheaper, and faster, or is there something else going on that you're seeing in the marketplace?
Yeah, I think one of the driving factors is that automotive industry today is requiring a lot more sensors. So that drives the volume, it drives a lot of innovation. And now that innovation that was done for automotive is migrating, for example, into people's homes. And so that's really allowed for a price point to come down where it can really, affect a lot of people's lives because of the innovation of cross-platform or cross-industries from automotive to, consumer or home type products. And so we're seeing a blending of automotive, medical, and consumer now with these kind of sensors.
Was it primarily driven by the move towards autonomous vehicles, or was it also just the driver assist portions of the automotive space?
Yeah, so I think initially the industry was really pushing for autonomy. 10 years ago, they told me we were going to be driving autonomously in 5 years, right? So now that we're 10 years later, but I think that kind of the end goal is what drove the innovation, where the cars would be autonomous. That was kind of the end goal. So that drove a lot of development and a lot of investment into the industry. But that turned into driver assistance or driver monitoring, or because there's a lot of steps between a car from 20, 30 years ago to get to fully autonomous. So those steps along the way, there were several technologies that needed to be developed, and so there's like milestones that you can go along the way that then those milestones that were developed for that technology can be applied to varying industries and stuff. So that's kind of, you're seeing customers or companies pivot to where they can take the technology developed for the autonomous vehicle or what would be required for that and then apply it to lots of different industries, actually.
Right. So that's where I think you've already answered my next question, where, do you see these new types of sensors hit the market, or is it more about existing or older technologies, maybe that were applied to something like the automotive industry, and then now they're just being developed in new ways? So that sensor that is now cheap enough because it's in volume for a car can now be placed on a different device and used in the home.
Yeah, that's correct. It's really, a lot of the innovation to get it into the car was to be able to get the price down to, shrink the geometry of the semiconductor, get the volume up, and then that enabled the lower cost, which then, what's interesting though, is we're seeing some of the tech that was slated for the car actually coming out in consumer home products faster, because automotive takes longer to development. It's a slower design process.
Okay.
So even though the tech was originally done for automotive, we're seeing some industries actually adopt it faster than automotive.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
No.
I was going to say the price point stuff that was originally targeted for automotive is what drove it. But the volume is going to come that way. But
yeah,
it's all interesting.
Do you see new types of sensors of things that you're like, oh, I didn't know you could do that into a sensor, or as the world of sensors, is there anything that can't be sensed, I guess, these days?
I think historically the problem has always been, like the most interesting thing of the recent tech, which I think is really driving the market, is actually edge AI. So the advantage of edge AI is that you now have enough processing locally that you could put a sensor in a room, a sensor in the car. This edge AI gives you the ability to process it locally and send a small amount of data. So that way you can, because AI algorithms require a lot of data.
Yeah.
And that's basically what differentiates AI from a standard algorithm, is that you give it tons of data and it's able to capture anomalies even below the noise floor. And so the ability to process that locally and having some sensor stream data constantly to it, I think that's really some of the technology that was available sensor wise in the past wasn't being able to be utilized because there wasn't edge eye capability. And that's something I think that, even in automotive, even if it's a giant computer they're putting in the dash, technically that's edge AI because that's not happening in the cloud.
Yeah.
So that's really what's enabling, these, having edge AI capability is kind of enabling a whole bunch of different applications for the sensors.
Yeah, I remember in the days of the Internet of Things and the IoT sensors that were coming out, the big selling point was always about, well, we've got the sensor and you're going to put it into a remote office that's 50 miles away, and it'll be a small amount of data that goes across, so you don't need a heavy network anymore. But as and those are still existing, and those applications where you can't have a lot of data crossing the network, because if you did, it would be too expensive and you would need faster networks and things like that. But now you're saying that with edge deployment and possibly 5G and things like that, you can now look at new applications for a lot of these sensors that you couldn't do before. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
And then there's a bunch of AI training engines and stuff that are coming out that'll enabling algorithms that weren't really possible or people didn't think could be developed on the edge before. So that was definitely one of the trends that I've seen recently, is a lot of AI training companies, like they're training algorithms. So like they're algorithms that enable AI to work better for you, or quicker training, or what data you give it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of the things that really help enable these markets.
All right, so let's go over some of the new markets that you're seeing, because you gave me a list ahead of time that I just want to dig into a little bit of where you're seeing a lot of these new sensors, and you're saying that aging tech is one of those big areas where you've got a lot of people that are now getting older and they want to like stay in their home, and how is that technology helped by new types of sensors?
Yeah, I mean, I think to give it some context, like, all boomers will be over 65 by 2030. So
wow.
that basically,
wow, yeah.
Yeah. So if you think about it that way, that's the reason.
And that's only 5 years away.
No, exactly. So that's all boomers will be 65 or older, right?
Wow.
So that means, there's going to be a significant population of people that still want to live in their home. They still want to be, disrupted, and they're also not necessarily scared of tech because, a lot of boomers have been using a smartphone for the last 10 years or something, so they're a little more accustomed to it than say someone who's already in their 80s or something. Now it may be more challenging for them to understand some of the technology. So I think that's the part of the reason that the industry has kind of put a lot of effort into the age tech. One is because of the aging population, but then also there's they're a little bit more tech savvy than the previous generation. So a good example of that is millimeter wave.
Yeah.
So, for example, millimeter wave was designed the primary focus was for autonomy in the car, right? So you could use it for child left behind in the car or for autonomous driving. So inside the car was 60 gigahertz. And so that 60 gigahertz can also be used inside people's homes. So you can do things like fall detection or motion tracking, or you can tell if someone is laying in bed versus laying on the floor so, for example, you can detect someone that's fallen, and then you can detect if someone's fallen using this technology without invading any of their privacy. Because historically, the alternate solution was to use a camera.
Right.
But people don't want a camera in their bathroom or in their bedroom. So the advantage of using millimeter wave is we can get the image of someone falling. And it's not an image, but you kind of get their outline of someone falling. And the way that we're differentiating with millimeter wave is you're detecting the breathing object. So millimeter wave is so accurate, we can tell that object's breathing. So that's how we can tell from a human versus a chair, for example. So if you fall down, we can tell how long you've been there, and what, some concept that came up is like, for example, say your mother falls down, you would get a notification that, hey, your mother had an event, she fell down. You call her and say, hey, how are you feeling? I see you may have fallen down. She says, oh, I'm fine. It wasn't a big deal. But then the following day, she stays in bed all day.
Right.
So clearly, that she's not okay, that she's in pain and, she should be checked. There are a lot of statistics that, for example, if you break your hip, the faster you have surgery, your recovery is much shorter. So those are the kind of things, a lot of people are hesitant to go see a doctor or things. So, you have someone else on the outside that can encourage you to go in based on change of events, change of lifestyle, those kind of things. You can also use millimeter, there are people looking to want to track prescriptions, for example. You could train the system like, hey, they take their pills at this desk at this time, or something like that. So you could set notifications, that they didn't follow their pattern that day.
Right.
So there's all kinds of things that you could do with millimeter wave without violating any of their privacies or things like that.
Yeah, well, like what I love about millimeter wave was that initially the technology was trying to be used to promote 60 gigahertz, right? For Wi-Fi, and it beyond for Wi-Fi or home wireless, and it was all about you're going to need this speed for VR stuff. And of course the VR technology didn't really take off. So, I love that now millimeter wave can be used within the home, but in a different scenario or a use case. So that's a great example of how a technology can follow in new use cases instead of the ones that it was initially promoted for, correct?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of, it's just real interesting because there's several companies doing the same kind of thing where they've developed it for automotive. They're doing consumer versions. They're going after age tech. It can also be used in medical applications, like in hospitals, finding if someone fell out of their bed, for example, or someone got up out of their bed that wasn't supposed to be moving, so you can notify a nurse to go check on them. They're not supposed to be, getting out of bed, for example. So there's a lot of applications that it could be used for.
All right, and so I want to move on to a couple of other use cases. I think we were talking before the show about smartwatches and smart wearables and things like that. You've seen some temperature sensors. You've gotten some sensors that can detect fertility cycles and glucose monitors, things like that. Like, talk a little bit about maybe how that's changed over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main difference for temperature monitors are like there's been several wearables that have monitored temperature, but this year we've launched a new sensor that tracks. It basically measures with a gap, so it doesn't have to have contact. So it's a non-contact temperature sensor. So the advantage of that is if you wear wearable like a watch or like headphones or something like that, if there's movement, it doesn't need contact, so it can basically detect the surface of the skin. So if you've got so you can monitor temperature while you're exercising, while you're walking, just normal activity. Several other devices today only monitor your temperature accuracy, like while you're sleeping or while you're motionless, because they're using a contact type. So part of the reason they're doing that is because, they're trying to maintain battery life and things like that. So, this newer sensor that we came out with just gives you more flexibility to track your body temperature over time. And one of the use cases for that is actually to monitor the cycle of a woman. And so that way you can know when you're more apt to get pregnant, for example, or, you can basically you could track the fertility cycle of a woman trying to get pregnant, for example. And so that's, an interesting use case that you can get more accurate data if you were monitoring it, all the time.
Do you find that a lot of the applications around the sensors, it just depends on the software and the application of it? Or do you have to, if you're developing something like a glucose monitor, for example, or, a smartwatch that can track the temperature, do you have to switch out the sensor that might already exist, or can you use existing sensors but just use them in new ways based on the software?
Yeah, I mean, so I think, like, for example, the sensor that we just launched, its differentiating factor is it doesn't have to be still or contacting the skin. So because of that, it enables new algorithms, right? Because now there's different use cases and different ways you can utilize that sensor. So I think basically as the sensor technology improves and it becomes less cumbersome or less power more to save power, that will allow a lot of new applications to open up.
All right. And I've got one more interesting one that I want to talk about, but then I've got a fourth thing that I want to bring up on the energy side of things. Chemical and liquid detection. And you've seen something like, you've seen a smart diaper, for example, being developed using a chemical or liquid detection sensor. And this thing is like, again, so all of my kids are beyond that phase of their life, but smart diaper that can alert you when it detects chemicals in there, and I think we all know what chemicals they're detecting.
Yeah, so it's again back to the old principle, like when you were in elementary school or junior high, where you took a lemon and you poked in two little rods, right, and then you measured the voltage across that. I don't know if you remember doing that, but essentially that creates a very small voltage when you do that reaction with a lemon or potato or however you did it back then. And so if you put a polymer and an electrode in the diaper, now what we can do is the same principle where, when that diaper gets moisture in it or liquid, then we can use that with one of our energy harvesting devices, which then can boost that power to a usable level and then transmit a wireless signal to, either your phone or a, home IoT network. So you're basically making a smart diaper that is battery free. And so the advantage of that is you don't have any processing going on, so it's very safe. There's no electronics that are running all the time. the electronics don't turn on until the battery needs to be, or until the diaper needs to be, someone needs to take some action against the diaper.
Yeah.
And so there's two use cases. One use case is potentially you could change your infant even before they woke up. So you could try to change their diaper before, they started crying, and that was your, diaper sensor.
Right.
The other option would be for elderly, because maybe some elderly, are staying in bed. And so maybe certain nights they have issues, certain nights they don't. You don't want to have to go check on them and wake them. So this would give you an option where you could utilize this technology to, if they had an accident or something like that. It could also help with nurses.
Yeah.
The other advantage too is this electronics can just be transferred from one diaper to another. So the electronics themselves would essentially last forever. Because you would just click onto the electrodes.
So is something like this more impressive, not because of the sensor stuff, because I think you and I joked about, well, I've got a pretty good sensor for a diaper, and it's right there between my glasses, and or is it more about the energy savings? Because again, that's the other thing I wanted to bring up, is that you can now take there's a lot of technology that will allow devices to be harvest their own energy, right? Can you explain a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah, so there's several different approaches. So you can harvest energy from wireless now. So like there's so much Wi-Fi in people's homes now. You can, if you've got a low power sensor, you can basically harvest that wireless energy, store up at local charge, and then, take a measurement or transmit something if you need. So there are so many. So there are also the solar panel technology has progressed dramatically. So now there are indoor solar panels. So from a relatively small solar panel, you can do things like window sensors, or, for example, a TV remote control that would never have a battery. It would just capture the interior light, and that would charge it. So the advantage of that is it kind of goes with the green initiative that everyone's trying to do. So people are trying to be carbon neutral and stuff, but throwing away or recycling batteries it's definitely one of the challenges in the world today.
Yeah.
And so using these energy harvesting technologies, you can basically make devices that don't have, and it's better from a user experience too, because you don't have to worry about changing batteries and things like that. So I think from the diaper perspective, that's one of the best advantages, is you don't have to worry about, oh, did I change the diaper? Is it, the battery in the diaper? So it's kind of like you never have to worry about it. It's just always going to work based on the reaction. And so those are the kind of things that I think will enable these sensor technologies to be more part of your life, because there's no, they're just seamless, because you don't have to worry about maintaining them or things like that. It'll just happen automatically. And I think that's like, as people want to age in place, or people want these sensors become part of their lives, I think that's what will really enable these new applications.
Yeah, like you brought up the indoor solar sensor too, and I'm old enough to remember those solar powered calculators that we all had.
Yep.
And you would shine it at a light for to charge it up, and then you would use it, and you wouldn't have to put a battery in it. Basically, and I'm sure that those things still work if I can go dig up a calculator somewhere. Do you think that those will make a comeback too, as this energy harvesting happens?
Definitely, because the amount of energy you can get out of those now is much higher.
Yeah.
So that will enable a lot more. The other thing is, as sensor technologies, power consumption goes down, and as these other alternative energies or energy harvesting methods, increase their efficiency to capture them, you're going to see more and more like that old calculator you had back in junior high.
Yeah, just watch out for big battery. Those that industry.
Well, don't worry. They're big in the EV market. There's plenty of big batteries.
That's true.
For that.
That's true.
So all of their attention is on that, so don't worry about that.
All right,
they got plenty to sell to.
Now you brought up a couple of cases when we were talking about the aging in place issue, where there is always a potential for false positives. Now you brought it up from the privacy perspective with cameras, but I wanted to get your opinion on this. There was a high profile example, I want to say last year, maybe even before that, where people that were wearing Apple Watches and were going downhill skiing were triggering the accelerometer or whatever sensor was on there, thinking that they'd gotten into a car crash. And there was a big article in the Wall Street Journal about all this. So how does the industry try to address that false positive factor? Because you don't want to start making sensors that are going to go off all the time and then give you these false positives. I want to really make sure that my mother-in-law has fallen rather than just dropped the sensor that she was wearing or whatever was detecting that.
Yeah, and I think one of the advantages is, like, for in your home with AI, one of the ways you can do it is by tracking their patterns. Like, for example, that she normally doesn't, wake up at a certain time and lay down and stretch at a certain time.
Yeah.
You can also track. So from that particular example, one of the advantages of having the device off of your body is that you can see how they fell. even if it's just their overall shape, you can get a velocity of how they fell. Did they lay on the ground for a certain period of time? When you're wearing a wearable like a watch, all you can really tell is an impact. So whether you slammed it up against the wall or up against the ground, in that example on the screen, they say, oh, are you okay? Did you fall?
Yeah.
But when you're, snow skiing or something, you've got it covered up. You don't see that message. You get a false positive that way. So I think, the edge AI applications can really help to alleviate the false positives, but, eliminating the false positives is basically mandatory for the market.
Yeah.
Because anytime you get false positives, the users will just ignore it, and it's useless.
Does that also mean
so you have to be able?
Yeah. Does that also mean that you're then linking the sensor, to other data tracking, so that you want to make sure that the data is tracked, and you've got the software that understands the data? It's almost like these devices will become data trackers in addition to just the sensor part, right?
Yeah. So a lot of companies are making kind of an ecosystem. So there's not really a standard yet, but there's going to be an ecosystem of these devices where it'll interlink. So it'll track your movement outside when you're wearing your wearable, you get back home, and then it can track your movement inside your house, but it'll all be seamless. I think that's really the big advantage. And then you'll just be notified for anomalies, your heart rate or breathing rate, or, why your temperature is higher today. Are you feeling okay? Those kind of things. So you get a lot more of preventative, like telehealth. There was a big trend during COVID, but I think a lot of these activities, a lot of this sensor technology will be able to alert you for things that are maybe going wrong in your life, or, things that could basically change the course of your life earlier on, and try to help prevent some of the chronic diseases that so many people are, have as they get older.
Who are the leaders in the space when you talk about the application layer of a lot of these new devices? Is it depend on the industry that you're looking at? Like aging in place is going to be different, or aging tech is going to be different from like maybe health and fitness?
Yeah, and I think that's the case, because a lot of these big companies have their own niches, their own customer base.
Yeah.
But a lot of them, one of the things we're doing is they're trying to branch out. Like, for example, you may want to wear, have a wearable that, you're doing for health and fitness, but then let's say, you want to then get pregnant, you're a female trying to get pregnant. So that's kind of the same market, even that's more health combining with, that's kind of a health application versus just a wellness. So those are kind of things that I think you'll see more of. Those combining applications will be the next step.
Do you see? So that makes me think of another question where, in the future, are people going to have multiple devices attached to all different parts of their body, or is it going to be maybe a single device that will track a lot of different things and have a lot of different sensors on it, or is it going to be a mixture of both?
I think my personal opinion is going to be a mixture, because it depends on your activity.
Yeah.
Right. So, if you're at the gym, you may just want to wear headphones. If you're daily life, you may want to wear a smartwatch, or if you're, so there's or if you're in the house, you may want to wear nothing, you want to take a shower, so, it depends on, I think what will make this tech really popular is when you're not thinking about it, because the device is just a part of your life.
Yeah.
So if it's too clumsy and cumbersome, it's not going to be popular. So I think that's really what's going to enable. That's really, I think, why we're at an inflection point, because now you can make devices that are a lot more seamless. And so I think that's really the reason that these devices didn't really exist 10 years ago.
Yeah. Do you see a lot of, like, getting back to that company's question, do you see the big tech companies exploring this, or is this more of a startup space where you're just seeing individual new companies?
We see it in startups, big tech, medium, everyone's targeting it. And the main thing is because they can take their existing business and expand it, right? So it's a way to add value. And a lot of people wanted to get into the data space. So you have the people that own the clouds. They're interested because there's more data to be pumped in the clouds. You have the people in the middle who want to make devices that can feed information, give feedback, add value. Yeah. And then you have startups trying to come up with new applications for it. So it's really kind of fits all of them, actually.
Is it going to be advantageous for the big tech companies that'll eventually win out, or does it just depend on the market?
It depends on the application, but you may see big tech companies do acquisitions as well. If you startups with good ideas, there's definitely a large market. So that's why so many companies are focused on it.
All right. And you were
all sizes.
And you were at CES this year. Was there anything there that jumped out at you that, like, you looked at and went, oh, wow, that's a neat idea? Or did you even get a chance to walk away from where you were probably meeting with customers and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, our what's interesting is our booth was incredibly busy because of the smart diaper. And so, that generated so much, even people that were unrelated to industry, but I think it kind of really opened people's minds to other applications where you can do a smart device that has, a sensor-based device that maybe has no battery that feeds an edge AI device. So I think my personal view of what I saw there was edge AI was a lot more, realistic now.
Yeah.
There's a lot more companies making processors at varying price points, varying processing levels, depending on what you're trying to do. So there's a lot, you don't have to buy a square peg and try to fit it in all these other applications. So because there are so much edge AI, processors available, and, that's going to really enable a bunch of other applications. So
yeah.
I think that was the most interesting aspect to me because, we were pushing sensors, but a lot of people were linking them with other stuff, interested to talk about this, to talk to this other thing that they were making. So I think from my perspective, that was the most interesting thing at CES.
And it
there's definitely a lot more age tech talk this year than in the past. I think automotive was maybe reduced some at CES, not as much buzz, but someone came up to me and told me hey, you can only show a bigger monitor in automotive so many times, a bigger screen here, more screens,
Right.
So there was, I think, less change in the automotive market. So it wasn't as much buzz around it, but there's always trends and waves in the tech fields at CES.
Well, it definitely feels like too that everyone had AI on their mind, and I'm surprised. I was going to say is AI being a big component in this space as well, but I think you already answered that question when you talked about edge.
Yeah. I mean it's what it's enabling it. Without AI, it's kind of not possible to get the performance you need.
All right. So now, for those not familiar with the market, how long would it take from, some of these new announcements where you have these types of products and these use cases? How long does it take usually companies to develop this where an average consumer will then be able to see this stuff on the market? Or, is it a matter of multiple years? Is it just within a year? Is it faster than that? How fast can companies move from concept to delivery?
Yeah, I think what you'll see is that you'll see companies launching concepts within a year, and then they'll go to full production. Most companies are trying to target a 2-year design cycle or less.
Yeah.
Just from an investment and trying to capture the market trend. And then in automotive, it's more of a 3 to 4 year kind of development time. And that's why I think some of these technologies that were originally for automotive, you'll see in consumer first. Just because the design can move faster.
Yeah. Some great stuff, Greg. Again, thanks for giving us an update on what's going on in the world of sensors. So I appreciate you being on the show.
No problem. Great talking to you, Keith.
All right, that's all the time we have for today's episode. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, add any thoughts you have below. Join us every week for new episodes of Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Thanks for watching.